been doing GenAI way before it became fancy.
Yes.
And you taught a huge Coursera course.
Yes.
How many people?
I now teach millions of people.
That's
But it
crazy.
started with one.
So it started with one. At some point, it was like 100,000. Now it's million. How do you think the audience changed when you started and when this whole move
Yes.
happened?
Well, I think the biggest thing is how commercially relevant it is today. So initially, it was a very just magical piece of technology. You know, you could almost, or at least I could see the promise of it, where it was going. But of course, the outputs it was producing, not really usable, right? The image-based models, they were producing images that looked like nightmares, kind of people that would show up in horror movies, but that was considered good, better than just random pixels. And so that was really compelling at the time. And now we can generate videos that look completely realistic. So it's a completely different point. I started working on generative AI around 2016, 17.
2016, 17. Yeah, I remember thinking about in 2019, I was creating this whole concept of media that
Yeah.
would use generated images,
Yes.
voices, anchors, and no one would believe me. I was like, no, guys, it's going to happen. So,
Well, you're a visionary.
but it was amazing to see these horrifying pictures and like being fascinated with them.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I feel like it weirdly turned on my maternal instinct. Yes, I was like, these are my children. Because you could see the model improve over time. Like over time, you see eyes as it trains, and then you see a full face, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I nurtured it to get to this stage. I tuned the right hyperparameters. I put in the right data to get it into the right place. And so it did weirdly turn on my maternal instinct. And I would call them my children. And I think my PhD advisor, Andrej, was like, that's a little weird, but okay. And I would have all these, honestly, I had all these screenshots on my computer of these generated faces, which looked really weird at the time. But I think now it's like, ubiquitous, right? People are generating things all over the place, and it's magical seeing how creative people are. So something that makes me really happy is I feel like a lot of people have also seen the magic in this technology, and it's not just me that's been just captivated by it.
Yeah, it's absolutely
Yeah.
magical. How did you move from like creating, working with images to what you do now?
Yeah, such a good question. So in between, I started working on language as well. My background, actually, before my PhD, I was a product manager. But before being a PM, I actually studied classics, like Latin and ancient Greek literature, and I loved languages. So all of that kind of combines into language and communication for product and just in storytelling. And so I loved all those pieces. I love Disney and Pixar movies. Maybe that's a big piece of it. I love putting that all together. And so I started working on language as well. I was the head of AI research of a nonprofit, not OpenAI, but nonprofit for aligning language models similar to OpenAI safety for these language models and working with them there. That was probably around 2020-ish, 2021 maybe. And I started working on the language models more because they really took off from a commercial standpoint. And I felt like the use cases would make a very big difference in the enterprise, where I have my experience professionally in product. I was an enterprise product manager, and so that's what really motivated me to start this company. And a few things kind of drove me to start Lamini. One was seeing all these amazing foundation models. I thought, well, wouldn't it be even more magical if more people in the world could steer these models, right? More people could define safety, more people could define where these models could grow and what these models could be capable of. And they could really steer what this model's behavior should be and what the model's knowledge should be, which is what, currently is a little bit more confined to the likes of OpenAI and Anthropic, et cetera, because they have those AI researchers. So I thought, what if we can enable more people, developers, starting with developers, maybe not, my grandma yet, but starting with developers, to be able to steer these models. And there are 24 million developers out there, probably more now, given AI. But what if we could give them the keys to doing that? I think we'd be able to build better models. I deeply believe that AI experts like myself, we can't define all the different definitions of safety of what goodness is in these models, of what useful applications are in these models, what real capabilities they can give to the world and how they could serve the world. I believe that people who understand their own problems best are, when given the right tools, are best suited to solve them. And they can definitely see those problems better than myself. And I saw that during my PhD too. I studied generative models like generative AI, and that was my dissertation, but I also did some projects that were applied in healthcare. So we collaborated with the medical school at Stanford, and it was very clear to me that the doctors had such deep insight into what these, what machine learning could actually help with that was not super obvious to me in terms of how could this help with cancer. Oh, it's predicting this bacteria that predicts cancer, And so I didn't know that. And so they understand that very deeply, and how this could be an assistive tool, how could this be, helpful in diagnostics. I feel like for all these disciplines, if we could give this magical technology as a tool to all these people, that would just enable so much more impact in terms of what we do. And so that was kind of the seed of starting Lamini. And then Lamini grew into finding okay, what vertical of intelligence do we want to help people steer these models to first, right? We can't do everything. Even OpenAI doesn't do everything. They're focused on reasoning today. And so what vertical do we want to focus on? And talked to 300 potential customers and came up with this idea of, actually initially it was helping people access their structured data of text to SQL. And then it morphed, as I talked to more customers, morphed into, we need to be able to steer these models further, not just for this vertical, but more broadly in this horizontal platform. So then it turned into fine-tuning these models, editing these models directly, right? Taking it to the next step, not just prompting them, deeply editing them, and then doing backprop on them. And then the next stage was realizing, actually we don't want to cover everything because that's a lot for a startup to do, and it also is confusing to the end customer. So let's focus on one vertical of intelligence and do that really well. And the biggest problem that we saw was hallucinations, and people kept mentioning hallucinations, and we decided to double click and ask, and not just ask, but really inspect in the customer's data and understand what their objective was, exactly what was hallucinations to them. And we realized it was actually a technical problem, not a philosophical one. And that for many of them, it was just that certain tokens needed to be, a little bit more deterministic in certain contexts, and they couldn't be made up. And I'm sure there's multiple definitions of hallucinations, but that was one of them. This is a very, once we were able to frame the problem correctly, we were able to solve it technically. Now, was it easy? No, we had to do surgery to the models, and we had to edit the way the models were post-trained, fine-tuned, and we basically, we created a new kind of recipe that alters the LoRa adapter layer of these models and turns them into a mixture of experts, which effectively is equivalent to learning a retriever in a learned index, putting that into the adapter layer, as opposed to an external retriever for an index, which is like RAG. And so putting that into the weights of the model so that it could retrieve these facts very, very accurately, at extreme accuracy levels, to the nines of accuracy. And so we discovered this by working with these design partners, maybe a handful of them, not all 300, of course, and realizing, we can solve this problem. This is really exciting. It's not impossible. It's not just, and this was when OpenAI was releasing papers like hallucinations are by design, these models are designed to hallucinate.
No, that's very interesting because from my perspective, when people talk about hallucinations, it's sort of like a vibe thing.
Yeah.
It is not very accurate. So it's more like an impression, or you find something very concrete, but is it technical? People don't talk about it.
Right.
So when you found it, do you have any metrics or your
yes.
inside benchmarks for that to show companies?
Yes. Well, I think two types of benchmarks matter most. One is around, we have a comparison between a base model on a Wikipedia page, for example, on the Golden Gate Bridge, and it just hallucinates on the facts in it, versus our model doesn't hallucinate on the facts, right? And so it goes from something like 30% to 90% accuracy. So being able to show that. And then, of course, for our customers, often enterprises, for example, Colgate's one of our customers, they they and other companies don't really care about general evals, right? They don't care about MMLU or like how the models do on math. Like none of this matters to them. Many of them don't even care about the text to SQL benchmarks out there. So I think, for example, Spider and Bird, these are very common text to SQL benchmarks in the machine learning community and have been around for a while. And they don't care because they're like, just because a model does well on that doesn't mean it does well on my pretty complex schema. It's a very, very different task. And if you go inspect it, it's actually an extremely different task, not just that the schemas are much more complex, like the task itself is ill-defined for what the enterprise actually wants the model to do. And so what we do is instead, okay, well, let's inspect your own internal evals. Let's actually help you craft that in a way that is, and we have a framework for that they can follow and easily be able to craft that now. And so they can just follow that. Easy, medium, hard is kind of the simple breakdown. And let's get the model to actually tackle easy, medium, hard questions and get to, typically our threshold is usually around that 90% because I always want to see a 9 in there. For Colgate, it was from 30% accuracy using OpenAI's latest model. For another Fortune 100, they had even more complex stuff. It was 6% to 90%. So yeah, just very big leaps of what they can do. And the most magical thing for me is seeing them do it, like not us. Like I was not there. I did not write a line of code for them. They did it. Their developers did it. And that's really magical because it's not like they poached a team from OpenAI to do it, right? Like they're able to steer these models to that extreme accuracy. Oh, we can now rely on these models for these particular, tasks, tokens, and in this particular context, but it can still be this magical probabilistic system that can handle, similarities. It can handle things that are fuzzier as well, and so it combines almost the good aspects of determinism with the good aspects of probabilistic nature of these models, and so I find that really exciting.
That's incredible. How involved are you in the technical?
Yeah.
Involve coding.
Yes, these days actually more so than, I guess it fluctuates, but I will dive into the code. Recently I may have pulled like 3 all-nighters on the weekend to write something, build something out. But yeah, I think diving into the code is actually incredibly important. Especially in this space. I actually have an opinion that the best product people in this space are people who can work with these models. Either just work very comfortably with these models, write code around that, or actually be a machine learning expert themselves, because there's so much at the Pareto frontier of feasibility and usability here that we're working with. Like, let's say you're a product person and you imagine ChatGPT, but you couldn't actually really prototype all the pieces, like the instruction fine-tuning, RLHF. You would never, that would just be an impossible thing to build. Like you have to actually do both. And so I think it's incredibly important to do both.
You have such a deep understanding on so many levels. People not that knowledgeable. What is the most often misconception you see, you hear from the clients, from the enterprises specifically? What don't they understand about GenAI? What do you need to constantly explain them?
Oh, what do I need to constantly explain to them? I think there are a few things for AI researchers we find funny is not the right word, but maybe we're just surprised that the market is interested in a few things. One is just the word agent. I think AI researchers, I talk to my friends at OpenAI, Anthropic, and they're like, I don't know why the market cares about this, but I guess we have to do this for marketing. And it's interesting because I feel like my gut reaction was also an allergic reaction, but then I double-clicked more and started to talk to more and more people about it, including just non-AI researchers. And I think that's where it really clicked for me. This is just a different view into the same thing. So I think in a very model-centric way because I'm very comfortable with these models, and that's how I've been working for the past decade. But other people might not view it that way, right? They view it as like, how does this AI work with, interact with a person or mimic a person? And so I think the agent view of the world is like centered around like almost a human or an individual. The AI is an individual as opposed to AI as a model. And I think the equivalence in software engineering is OOP, like object-oriented programming. Essentially, that's like object-centered as opposed to like functional programming. So it's just a different view into almost effectively the same thing that you can accomplish. So I think that's one of the things that I find there being a mismatch between the experts and the folks who recently jumped into the space and are very excited about it. I think the other thing is around RAG. So I think people are kind of mesmerized. Spicy, like hottest. Yeah, no, I know, but I think people are mesmerized by RAG. And for those of us who've been in the space for a long time, we're surprised they are, because the ultimate retrieval is Google. Like, the ultimate retrieval has like been built, and it's actually not AI, but people view RAG as AI. It's actually this information retrieval, which has been around for much longer than AI, but it plugs into AI, and so it connects to the AI brain. And it's just fascinating to me that I think it's confused with AI, because there's no back propagation. You're just at, it's like what you effectively put into the prompt. And of course it affects the model as input, but it's just fascinating to me that people kind of conflate that together, because from a technology standpoint, that doesn't really mean anything. But when I think about it along with agents, it actually kind of makes sense, because I think then it's like the full agent does all these things and comes together, and it's this entity that's an individual, and then it kind of makes sense that they view this whole system as an AI as opposed to just the model piece. So it's so I find those kind of really interesting.
To the most
Sorry. Oh my God. It's just
agents, right?
No, I think they're important to like understanding things, hence why they're so big in the market, because I think they explain a lot to people. I think it actually is the almost user experience or interface that makes the most sense to other people. And it's just funny that I think in some ways, experts like myself, we have expert blind spot, right? So we just are so used to viewing the world from a model-centric way that it's almost a little confusing to us to see it that way. But I actually think it's a media person who opened my eyes the most. When I had a conversation with her, I realized, oh wow, like having the agent view of things actually makes way more sense to her of what AI does and how AI actually impacts the world. Like otherwise, if it's model-centric, she's like, how does that really impact the world? It doesn't impact the world, or it's not clear how it impacts the world. It's just like, it's not a clear story, right? It's not a clear line. But when it's agent-centric thing, it suddenly is very clear what it is. And so, it also matches all the sci-fi movies better. and so it just clicks. And I just thought about it, and I'm like, wow, I'm actually a little more into that. Yeah.
So it's more about narrative.
Yeah, or a view into things. And I think in a lot of disciplines, including software engineering, like I know narrative sounds subjective, but like object-oriented programming is a legitimate way of programming that different from functional, but it does help you, or at least some people, develop things in that, in that way. It's almost like each individual object is an individual, right? But it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. And it's funny because I feel like I'm a functional programming person, so I'm like, oh my God, no, this might not come as naturally to me. But
That's super interesting.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people ask and wonder about use cases. So you said about Colgate. What are other industries, use cases that you are proud of?
Yes, there's one that I'm very excited about. It's a global 2000 biotech company, one of our customers, and it's actually crazy what they're trying to do. They're trying to bring down a 3 to 5 year timeline of regular cancer research to just weeks. And that's just, if you just step back and think about it, that transforms an industry completely, right? Like that completely and fundamentally will change human health. And so I'm very excited about that because it not only helps them make money, but it also does good for the world, I believe. So I think that's transformational in a way that I can't even imagine how that industry will operate moving forward if if it does that, because now this one company is going to leapfrog other companies who can't do this. So that's very exciting. And what they're doing specifically is they're using our platform on premise, and they are combining both public patent data as well as private PII data together, because that's how they get the best information. But they're doing it in a private way, so it's safe and the data is secure, because they're not comfortable sending that away. But they needed to be highly accurate and specialized, and the goal was to get, quote, better than a scientist, and that is what they said. So very, very exciting times, I think.
Is it important for you, for the companies to have like super structured data?
Oh, I see. No, actually.
It's not important?
Actually, the most important thing for us is that the use case that these companies have objective outputs, meaning you can tell me what's good, better, and best, and your experts will agree with each other on it. Because the more subjective it is, you're basically giving the model multiple North Stars and it doesn't know where to go. And it can optimize for one, but then it'll just be worse at the other. And so these models are really good at optimization. So you want to be very clear what your North Star is. You don't want to have this like giant fuzzy blob and then everyone's upset, that it didn't go the right way. Biggest challenge we often face with our customers initially is just scoping that use case in a way where it is an objective use case. So that's why we actually like text to SQL. We can see, like, not only does it permeate every enterprise, because every enterprise has been putting their data into structured formats for a long time, for decades, right? And their most valuable data is there, because that's how we've done analytics historically. Not only that, but they also, like, when the SQL query fails, we can all agree it failed. Okay, we can all agree. There might be some subjectivity around some stuff, around some calculations of stuff, but we can write that down together and we can look at it. We can say, like, we agree the model should do this. When we've done factual reasoning cases as well, so like, these models are really good at reasoning, but they might not be grounded in the facts of your business, and you want to put a lot of facts into it. But sometimes people disagree. Sometimes domain experts will disagree with each other on what the right output is. Even stylistic things like, oh, well, I wish the model would be more concise. And then another person's like, I want it to be more verbose. Basically, you have to be very clear, like, what you want. And in the text to SQL case, it's just so clear. It's already laid out. So we like that for that reason. And there are some other use cases where it's clear like that. But I think something that's been surprising to me is that sometimes a use case can seem very clear on the outset, like function calling. Function calling typically is clear, but in some cases it's actually not clear in the way that our customer has set it up. And so I'm like, this is not clear. Like, no person would agree with this, like, labeled response, right, for example. And so figuring out what that is, I think, is important.
Do you think you will go from hallucination to cover some other?
Yes.
What's next?
Oh my goodness. Okay, I can't say exactly what's next because I do think hallucinations will take up a lot of time for us, and I think our customers will help show what would be prioritized next. But in terms of ideas, what's next? Like, one is creativity. Like, what if these models could be even more creative than they are now, and optimizing for that could be one thing. That's another vertical of intelligence. I don't know.
Just putting token after token, actually creating something.
Yes, or thinking divergently with people, right? But I don't know how valuable that is for us to create a business that does work, and that does bring in revenue. We do have to kind of follow where the value is. And right now, hallucinations is probably where we see the biggest value. Maybe the same amount of work as going after creativity, but they value this hallucination piece a lot more today.
For my news digest, I go through like hundreds of papers every week, and I came across this paper that's called How to Steer LLM Latents for Hallucination Detection. And I thought that was very close to what we're discussing. I don't know if you heard about it.
Yeah, tell me the premise.
They suggest truthfulness separator vector that basically will, nudge the positions of truthful statements away from false ones into this latent space more. So my question was, first of all, how do you follow research in this area? How do you do it? Because so many.
There's so much, yeah.
But is it more research with your team, or you look outside and implement what other people do? What is your process with research?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think a few things around research. I think one thing is because of the deluge of stuff, it's probably a combination of making sure we do read the highlights generally in the field because there are general trends, right? And then also actually implementing things in-house. I know these days there's a lot that's closed source, in fact, or closed, like, from whispers in the industry that we learn about. And of course, there's things in research papers still as well. And I think research papers are interesting, but just from my experience, it doesn't translate to commercial value or to actual commercial results. So I think there will be some where we will gather information and have an understanding of what researchers are proposing is true, and then develop a hypothesis of whether we should go inspect that for our particular case. So we will definitely be aware of as much as we can, but a lot of the focus is like, what can we make sure is actually useful for our customers? Yeah.
That makes sense. Do you open source your research?
We have some stuff open source, like we've published papers before, and we do have some that's open, but we don't have everything open. And in fact, probably our core IP is not open source today in terms of how we do that post-training on the model to keep it factual. It's funny that you bring up this paper. It matches the thesis of like you can actually steer the weights towards to higher factuality. And I fully believe that, and you can do that. And you can do that in many different ways. One way is we're able to do like fine tuning without supervision. And the reason why we're able to do that is because we have like automated data pipelines for these models that we essentially have agents that edit its own training data. And so that's what we do. But if you read the DeepSeek paper, they do a similar thing. They have a factuality validator effectively to train their reward model, right? And they have that in there. And so there's that ability to incorporate factuality in multiple different ways through backpropagation. And so that's what that paper shows. And I fully believe that thesis, right? That you can make the models more factual.
What's your general take on open source?
Oh, I love the way the open source is going. I mean, we leverage a lot of open source. We enable our customers. Usually, our customers are actually comparing effectively using one of open source models, using our system to post-train and edit it on their own model, like using Llama or DeepSeek first, and then using our system to modify it towards their data set so it doesn't hallucinate on their data, and comparing that against either OpenAI or Claude-based models. And so that's typically what's going on. So we depend so much on open source, and we're partnered very closely with Meta in particular on that, and also a bit with Mistral. And yeah, the DeepSeek stuff has been very helpful for us, and very helpful we pass it on to our customers, of course. Like some of our pipelines, it does benefit from reasoning, and so yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I didn't know you really use it so much in different open source models.
Yes, we do. Because our thesis is not for us as infrastructure to not own the models. It's for our customers to own them because they are deep derivatives of their data at the end of the day. And so we want them to be able to have that effectively apply their same data governance to their models and the weights. And so we don't need to see them, but we're just the infrastructure that helps them modify it.
In your bio on LinkedIn, you wrote, there are only a few hundred of us AI experts who can successfully teach and control AI. The future would suck if we were the only ones who could define what intelligence could be. I also find lack of knowledge about AI combined with the pace it's developing jarring and concerning. So tell me about your thinking. What should we do about this lack of knowledge?
Oh, yes. I think there are a few things we can do about it. So I think one is making the barrier to entry lower. So being able to make these tools much easier to use. So the kind of fine-tuning recipe, post-training recipe that we've developed is much, much easier to use than, say, OpenAI's fine-tuning API for Colgate, for example. They can successfully use it, right? So that's a big deal. It becomes easier and easier and easier to use. That will become the de facto way an AI expert might even use it, right? Like now we default all use these phones because it's so easy to use, but before that was originally maybe not the intended purpose, or it's for accessibility, right, for initially. And I actually deeply believe that this post-training and which includes fine-tuning and these RL methods, these can become as easy as prompting. And I think everyone kind of can do prompting, right? If you can Google search, you're prompting. Yeah, well, relatively easy to like monitoring loss curves and understanding what that even means. And so that's really exciting to me. And I think more automation around it or more intelligent design of these systems, or whether they be either more verticalized towards a form of intelligence, or it just deeply understands what these people what people want to influence or not in the model, can actually offer like the right types of inputs, right? Like you don't want to overwhelm people with these are all the hyperparameters you can possibly play with, because I think that becomes really overwhelming. And you have to understand all this math to edit them, and 90% of them don't matter for your use case, and and there's like default ones, and you actually don't need to know the math. So why bother like making it seem so complex when it can be so simple? And then the other thing is leveling people up. So lowering the barrier to entry and leveling people up will get people to be able to meet in that middle and be able to access this more. And so leveling people up is something I'm personally very passionate about, is around teaching. And my background is actually, like I said, classics. So I actually didn't have a computer science background going in, and I was studying literature. And I actually only went into computer science because I took a class where the professor said, it's never the user's fault. And I just thought, it's never been my fault. And because I was made fun of for using technology growing up, and I was not good with it. And I was really inspired to think, well, if I am the dumbest user, I can think of ways to design the system for that dumbest user like me, because I can see it. The experts can't see it. So I can see it, and I can make it so easy to use that then everyone won't feel intimidated by technology anymore. And so that's what inspired me. That's why I went into product management, actually, because you really think about the end user, and you want to empathize very deeply with that end user, and have a lot of user empathy and compassion for them. And so that's what motivated me. And then, of course, I just kind of fell in love with the magic of generative AI. And so combining that together is this company, and it's my courses of how can we make this all more accessible? How can we make this more accessible by lowering the barriers to entry and then leveling people up and not making it intimidating? Like, I try to make my courses as engaging as possible, and try to make them as intuitive as possible too, because I don't think you necessarily have to be bogged down by, the math, or sometimes the math can actually be quite simple. Probably an extreme case, I spoke to policymakers in DC and gave them like kind of a master class on it. And they were like, this is the first time I've actually understood neural networks. And I explained everything. I got pretty deep, and I kept it at the most technical language I used was multiplication and addition. And that's it. But they actually got it. And we went through the math. We went through math. And so I think it's possible, 100% possible, and it doesn't have to feel intimidating. And you can actually understand how this all kind of comes together. And it is magical once it all comes together. I do think people can understand all the pieces. And I think it can be done in an engaging way too. I'm kind of a believer of like, I thought about starting something like TikTok for education, but essentially edutainment.
Yeah. Great idea, because one of my big thinking right now is about kids. Because they use it as a natural part of their life.
Yes, they're AI natives.
They're AI natives, and I believe they do need to know what the technology it is, and what is machine learning, and what are all those. Prompting is not very easy, because you need to know how to communicate with a computer, and it's different from fine-tuning when you need to have like more technical knowledge. Please do the TikTok.
I've done. If one searches hard enough, one may be able to find some stuff. But like, I just think learning about this stuff can be very engaging and fun. And class I taught at Stanford previously, I actually created 100 memes for it and to help people study. Because like, why not laugh when you're studying? And one of the extra credits I gave people was like, if you can create a meme and I laugh at it, okay, fine. If it was funny, I don't have to laugh that hard. But like, if it was funny and you created a meme and you demonstrated your knowledge of the concept, and you could even have humor around it, because that means you demonstrate your knowledge. Like if you understand something, you can make a joke about it, right? But if you don't understand it, it's harder to make a joke about it. And so if you can demonstrate that, then you get an extra credit point. And so why not make it fun?